Hello everybody and welcome here to a new episode of Afterthoughts here in this beautiful environment of a 16th century chapel here in Echtel in Belgium, my hometown. I've made a video on the chapel and on this clavichord as an afterthoughts video for the Pachelbel, first aria of the Hexachordum Apollinis. I will link here in the video in an info card so you can check it out if you want to know somewhat more details on this beautiful environment where we are in now. Certainly not starting this video without thanking our local village, our local town for giving access to this beautiful place, and also taking a moment to thank our patrons on Patreon for their support. They're making this all possible. If you would like to consider supporting us on Patreon as well, even for $1 a music video, that can make a huge difference if many of you would do that, so we can take you much more in the future to locations as this, which we would love to do, and share other instruments with you. The sound you hear are airplanes, fighters for the Belgian army, so we're rather safe here. We have to deal with that in our neighborhood. Is very beautiful here, but that's the life of living close to a military airbase. One of the reasons, by the way, that the idea of a professional recording studio came, where we would get rid of these kinds of sounds. So diving in this Sweelinck piece, two main topics. First, it's mainly organ music, why I'm playing this on clavichord as a first Sweelinck piece, so to say. And secondly, also some things of technique on Sweelinck might be interesting to show to you how on these short keys you have to take care of your fingering, which is essential actually to play this music on instruments like this. And third topic, my first impressions on playing kind of virtuosic music as Sweelinck is, early 17th century, late 16th century on these instruments, and just give you some first impressions, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So Sweelinck Echofantasia, obviously on an organ you would play that on a manual organ, one keyboard, one manual, with some stops that give you a solo voice, strong solo voice, and the other ones for the accompaniment, and also for playing the echoes. On the really big organs, actually, you can play also on the third manual, the Bovenwerk, so to say. And that gives a really wonderful impression of Echofantasias. And actually in the northern German culture, also the places where Bach was, like Lüneburg, in 1700, he went to Lüneburg, visited the organ where Böhm was organist in St. Johanneskirche, and also went to Hamburg, where Reinken was organist, and Reinken also made use of these large instruments with 4 manuals, like in Katharinenkirche, and playing large fantasies with the same echo elements in is really amazing to hear in these large churches. So all this northern German organ culture, Sweelinck had an enormous influence on that, by students like Scheidund and Scheidemann. So there is a correlation actually from Sweelinck to Bach. That's for another video. So that works on an organ great, and obviously on the clavichord you can make different shadings in sound. So that's what I did, and it works great. And for instance, one of the passages here, and I will show the score on screen. This is a very interesting piece, because on one spot, and it's in this bar here, top of the page, you have the passage. So forte, ending on the G, and then with the echo. But in a normal Echofantasia, you would play this chord on the softer manual and this forte. You see what happens? I need the same key to play the solo voice, and Sweelinck leaves room for that by only making this G a half note, so making room. So So that's a strange place. I think there is another spot in this piece where that has the same, and there is, to my mind, not another Echofantasia where you have this same particular place where you can say, well, it's meant, the solo voice, the forte voice, so to say, is meant to be played on the strong manual, and the echo is played on another manual. By the way, that's an effect that works nice, but you can play it on one keyboard, you can play it on one manual, you can play it on a clavichord, and it works great. And so on. So that's one of the reasons that I took this piece as a beginning piece for this clavichord, except for the Pachelbel we did, as a Sweelinck piece, because it works really nice. And this clavichord, as small as it is, has excellent build quality and is able to give you the dynamic range that's necessary to make these shadings in sound. I would briefly touch on fingerings, since you will notice that this keyboard is very particular. For those of you who are not familiar with these old keyboards, there are very short keys, and it's very difficult to go with the fingers between the black notes. That's something you should avoid on any clavichord. It's rather impossible to make sound by playing here at the end of the key. But in fact you should try to avoid it on any historical keyboard, because they're designed to make sound on the edge of the keys. But on a larger instrument like mine, keys are a little bit longer, and there you can position your first finger, your thumb, on the key, which is possible also here. But you will notice that, and you will possibly do it yourself if you play on such a keyboard, that the really old fingering, where you have chords played with a second finger, instead of doing like this, I have to put the reposition even, it feels very natural. Also fifths like it is very normal, chords like this. Do it with my left hand, that you can see it. So there are many places where you just play it like that, and if not, it works really well. You should try it out. And then of course you have the ancient fingering with the let's see where I have a passage to show you. Okay, here. So that's the pre-Bach fingering, and actually I believe that's the pre-Northern German fingering. You know that J.P.Bach writes in his Versuch, so in his essay and a treatise on the art of keyboard playing, that his father implemented the first finger. That was a novelty in his time, and of course he was extremely proud of his father. But I believe that Bach, being in Lüneburg with Böhm and in Hamburg with Reinken, already was introduced to that, and maybe even by his brother Christoph Bach, who studied at Pachelbel's place in southern Germany. So that's something from before, because this Northern German later 17th century music, like Buxtehude for instance, it's impossible to play without the first finger. But here, many occasions, you have these still old fingers, so 3, 4, which works great on this instrument, or an instrument with this kind of keyboard, and you have this kind of articulation, which is, if you release the key very well, so not rushing, it's a replacement of weight more than really rushing to the new keys. So heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy. So 3, 2, and then. And also on these kinds of instruments and keyboard, it's really essential, certainly also on the organs, if you play on very 17th century organs, just to maintain this hand position as long as you can, also in drums. I will not I will not do this. And you get a nice accentuation pattern by that. Also here. Also here, every time from the same movement of weight, one movement. So the story you read in JSBach that Johann Sebastian Bach was able to keep his hand very steady and very silent and so you couldn't see his movements. That's right, but that can be the case, but that doesn't imply that his hand was fixed and stiff. You have to play with weight on an organ and on a clavichord. That's one of the reasons that these instruments are so related. When you can play on this instrument, you can play on a full manual Hamburg instrument like the St. Jacobi of the new organ in St. Catharines. No problem. But you have to apply the same technique. So it would be impossible with a very fixed wrist. And certainly then you have no access to this, to a kind of sound development, really going into the keys. So listen to the difference. Without weight and with a fixed wrist. Or with a kind of movement allowing the weight in the key. Here I must admit I take modern fingering. I shouldn't. But it's really tricky. Okay. So weight and finger speed, combination of that is key for clavichord playing in general, but dealing with old fingerings is really essential. So that's a brief introduction in Sweelinck and old fingerings. This could be, we could talk about this, I think, for weeks, because it's very interesting. And this fingering is kind of essential element. Actually, I should say, if you would like to start with Bach playing in the more historical fingering, whatever historical means, because that's something we can talk about in extent, because nobody really knows. We can only read sources, and they're giving us only a snapshot. But what I want to say is, if you start with Sweelinck, or with music of that time, Dutch music, so to say, is very good for that. Antonie van Noort is another composer. More in Flanders, you could go to van der Kerkhoven, Abraham van der Kerkhoven. It's a little bit different. Peter Cornet, other composer, but this kind of music, that fingering is rather, I wouldn't say easy, but it's simpler than music of Bach in that regard of making fingerings. So it's a great way to start if you want to dive into historical fingerings. And once I will do more about that, and even publication of some scores with my fingerings is in the pipeline, but that needs to be structured, so it's for next year, I think. That's for another video as well. Share with you that information. So last topic, playing Sweelinck on this instrument. There's a triple fretted clavichord, which means it's rather easy to play, I must say. The key depth is rather shallow. It could be a little bit more, but not much to my taste. But the only tricky thing on these fretted clavichords is you have to be very careful with the releases. In that respect, they resemble very much an organ, where you have to do the same thing, make a very clear articulation. Because the instrument is fretted. I've talked about it in the previous afterthought, to make a link if you would like to see that, what it really means. But I have to release the key in order to play the next one. So the sound becomes more articulated, whereas in the 18th century, with the unfretted instruments, you get a more legato sound, more cantabile sound. Here on these instruments you have a more articulated sound, which is which is not avoidable, because it's the nature of the instrument, of the fretted instruments, to do it like that. So you need a very good release, but other than that, they play rather easily. The sound production is much more direct than on a, and it's much, how would I say in English, it's more difficult on a big unfretted clavichord than on a fretted instrument. So music of Sweelinck, like for instance the Echofantasia, which could be played on this instrument as well. The big fantasias, let me say it like that. If I play on my Saxon instrument 1750-60, I feel by no way any restraint of playing 18th century music. Mozart, Bach, even Beethoven compositions that are possible to play on the clavichord. It feels natural, it feels as if I do not have to make any compromise at all. And certainly with Bach, Haydn, Mozart, Bach inventions, sinfonias, partitas, I've said that before, it feels as if Bach had the clavichord in mind while composing that. Large fragments, large parts of the whole-temperate clavier as well. So, going back in the 17th century with this music of Sweelinck on this instrument, then things becomes tricky, because you have to pay attention to many things. All these scales with a good arm weight, finger speed, etc. It's very complicated music as well. And then these instruments, as beautiful as they sound, but again, that's just a question. I'm not the expert to tell you that. It's just my reflection that I give to you. And if you know more about it, share it in the comment boxes. I will be glad to read your experience with that. My experience is that maybe in that time, the harpsichord was the instrument that gave the possibility to players on this level, because that was the highest level at that time, to play without compromises. And maybe, again, there's just an impression, as beautiful as this clavichord can translate that music with the typical characteristics that the clavichord have of dynamics. My feeling is that if you compare this, for instance, with the partitas of Bach, need actually these shadings of different sounds, that you need the clavichord. That's at least how I feel it, and that the harpsichord for that music, for the partitas and most of the work of Bach, is perhaps a little bit an old-fashioned instrument, if I may say so. I know I will losing half of my subscribers now, but anyway, that's how I feel it. But that in this time, the clavichord is not developed in a way that it could replace the harpsichord, and that the harpsichord is really the perfect instrument for this music next to the organ. And so again, I will stress the fact that I'm not saying you shouldn't play it on these instruments. I'm just giving you my first thoughts, my first impression, which can reflect on an historical development, I don't know. But to me, this is a really different instrument than an unfretted instrument, which opens complete new world of music and of Empfindsamkeit, developed more in the 18th century, but started, to my feeling, already with J.S.Bach. So again, don't take this as a point of as a polemic point or a provocative point. It's just sharing my impressions with you, and please let me know how you think about that. Anyway, I thank you for watching. These afterthoughts are a little bit longer. It's due to the environment. Also, it's very inspirational to stand here, and one day, as I told you in the previous episode here, I would very much like to welcome you once here and organize some clavichord days, clavichord masterclasses. We could do wonderful things here. Who knows how that develops? Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing this video with your friends and subscribing to the channel as always. And we see each other again next video. Bye.